Hello everyone, welcome to our lesson. I'm combining two lessons, 7-5 and 7-6, and it is factoring trinomials. And basically this is the backwards or reverse order when we used FOIL in our last lesson. And so we're just taking the trinomial and we're putting it back into a binomial. Okay, so let's get started. We have the first page is all about factoring trinomials that have a coefficient, a first coefficient of 1, okay? And so the first thing that you always want to do is you want to make sure that your trinomial is ordered from greatest degree to least degree. Now, I've already ordered them for you, so you're not going to have to worry about that step, but you know, traditionally that's what you have to do. Step number 2, determine the factors of the product of the first and second term. And I'm going to show you with this example right here what that's talking about. So for step number 2, it says determine the factors of the product. That means when your product means you're multiplying two numbers together, of the first and second terms. So you have the first term right here, and there is an imaginary 1 there, okay? And you have your third term at 24. The product of 1 and 24 is 24, and so you would need to find the product of that, we said is 24, and then you want to find the factors of 24. So here they've listed the 3 factors of, or the 6 factors of 24, 1 times 24, 2 times 12, and 3 times 8. And so once you've done that, you move on to step number 3, which says determine which of those factors from step 2 will combine to get the second term. Okay, the second term is 11. So 1 plus 24 is 25, and 24 minus 1 is 23. That is not going to work, okay? So no on that one. We have 2 plus 12 is 14, but 12 minus 2 is 10. That does not equal 11. And then we have 8 plus 3, 8, 9, 10, 11 is 11. So this is going to be, those are going to be the 2 factors you're going to use. So 3 times 8 is 24, and 3 plus 8 is 11, okay? And then it says to write out the binomial expression. So in this case, with this example, we are going to use 3 and 8, and we would write it as x plus 3, x plus 8. And this is the factored out form of this trinomial. And the way that you can double check and make sure that you factored it out correctly is to use the FOIL method, which is our last step to check your answer. So x times x is x squared. X times 8 is 8x. 3 times x is 3x. And 3 times 8 is 24. And then when you add these two together, you get 11x. And so you have x squared plus 11x plus 24. So you have, once you check that and it works out, you have factored this correctly. And this would be the 2 binomials that you would multiply together to get that trinomial. And that's what we'll be doing on this page. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I actually do this. And you don't have to do this method. You can do what they did up here. But I use this x here. And I multiply my first and my last term together to get 18, and I put that here. And then I put my 9 in the bottom of the x, okay? And so now what I'm doing is I'm trying to find factors of 18 that add up or combine up, because sometimes you're going to deal with negatives when we get further down, that combine to get 9. So I know 1 and 18, that's not going to work. And then I go 2 times 9, that's not going to work. 3 times 6, There we go. That is going to work. So I will be using the factors of 3 and 6 here. So I will write them out as x plus 3, x plus 6. Okay. Now, if I wanted to go back and double check to make sure I did that correctly, I can. And so x times x is x squared. Okay. X times 6 is 6x. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 6 is 18. Then I add these two together to get 9x, and then I double check x squared, 9x, 18, yes. And all my signs are correct. Since my trinomial is all addition here, then I know that my two binomials will all be addition. Okay, and so then that would be my answer for example number 1. Okay, if you want to go ahead and try this one, this is another addition. It's just like the one we did. Okay. All right, here we go. Let's look at this one. 6 times 1 is 6, and then I'm going to have 5 right here. You have to be very careful with this one because 1 times 6, you can subtract those to get 5, right? And 2 times 3, you can add those to get 5. So in looking at my trinomial, since it's all addition, I'll be adding my two factors together. So I know in this case that I will be using 2 and 3. Okay. So we have x plus 2 and x plus 3. All right. Going down to example 2, we're now going to be, we're going to have some subtraction included in that. So we have to be very careful when we plug our factors into the binomials. So, and let me show you what I do with this. Okay. I have a positive 4 times a positive 1 gives me a 4. So I'm looking for factors of 4 that are going to total up a negative 5. Okay. So I'm going to put a negative 5. And so you always want to carry the sign that's in front of your term and or your coefficient. And I've been saying that since the beginning of the year. So my factors are 4 or 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. Well, I can already tell that I'm not going to be using, I'm not going to be using 2 times 2 because that totals 4 or 0 if you were to add or subtract them. So I am going to be using 4 and 1. So the question is, I know that 1 plus 4 is a positive 5. So how are we going to get that to be a negative 5? Well, a negative 1 plus a negative 5, a negative 1 plus a negative 4 gives me a negative 5. And negative 1 times a negative 4 gives me a positive because a negative times a negative is positive. So I know that in this case, both of my numbers will be negative, both of my factors. Okay, so then I will write this as x minus 1 times x minus 4. Okay, and again, I'm going to use FOIL to check this. X times x is x squared. X times a negative 4 is a negative 4x. Negative 1 times x is a negative 1x. And negative 1 times a negative 4 is a positive 4. And then when I add these together, negative 4 minus 1 is the same as negative 4 plus a negative 1, gives me a negative 5x. And x squared, negative 5x, positive 4. Okay, that's my answer. Okay, so this next one is similar to this. Your first and second term are being subtracted. The second and third term are being added. So let's see if both of our terms in this next one are both negative as well. All right, so we have 15 times 1 is 15. Our second term is a negative 8. So we have to have two factors that add up to a negative 8 and multiply to get a positive 15. Okay, so we have 1 and 15. and 3 and 5. Okay, so we already know it's going to be 3 and 5. And it does look like those both have to be negative. -3 plus -5 is a -8. -3 times a -5 gives you a positive 15. So we write this as x minus 3, x minus 5. Okay. Alrighty. Let's go to examples 3 and practice 3. Now it's just a little bit different. The first and the second terms are being added. The second and the third terms are being subtracted. So let's see what that does to our factors. Okay, so we have a -10 because we want to bring the sign with it. Times a 1 gives us a -10, and then our middle term, our second term, is a positive 3. So you're going to notice in this case that if the products have to multiply to get to a negative, one of them is going to be negative and one of them is going to be positive. And don't forget that when you're combining integers, that when we're adding two integers together, that and one's positive and one's negative, you're actually subtracting, and then your sum or difference will take on the sign of the number that has the largest absolute value. So let's apply that here. All right, so we have 1 and 10 to get 10, and we have 2 and 5 to get 10. All right, so we already know we're going to use 2 and 5 because 5 minus 2 is 3. And since 3 is positive, that means the largest absolute value has to be positive. So 5 has to remain positive and our 2 will be negative. And what that just means is if you have a -2 plus 5, that's going to give you a positive 3. Or you can reverse that and do 5 minus 2 gives you 3. Okay. And then -2 times 5 gives you a -10. So we're going to be using these. And x minus 2, x plus 5. And I know a lot of students ask, does it matter which terms come first? No, it doesn't. I could put x plus 5 first and x minus 2 second. I could swap those if I wanted. I'm still going to end up with the same answer. It follows the multiplication rules, in that it doesn't matter what order you multiply in. Okay, so I'm going to check to make sure this is right. X times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x. -2 times x is a -2x. And -2 times 5 is a -10. And then I combine these two middle terms because they are like terms, and I get a positive 3x. So we have x squared, positive 3x, and a minus 10, subtract 10. So that works out. And that's the answer. Okay, so let's go ahead and try practice 3. Okay, -54 times 1 is a -54, and then 3. Okay, so I can look at this -54 and I already know what terms are going to total 3. If you don't, you just have to list the factors, but I know it's going to be 6 and 9 because 9 minus 6 is 3. And in this case, since 3 is positive, that means my larger number has to be positive and my smaller number will have to be negative. If this was negative right here, which we're going to get down to the bottom, then that might change. Okay, so we are going to use these terms right here. And we're going to do x minus 6 and x plus 9. Okay. All right. Let's go down to number 4. Okay, so now instead of one of them being negative, they're both negative. So let's see how this affects what we're doing here. -8 times 1 is a -8, and then we have a -7. Okay, so we have 1 times 8 and 2 times 4. Well, 2 and 4 combine to get either 6 or 2. That's not going to work. So 8 minus 1 is 7. Now notice that this is a negative 7, which means that my larger number needs to be negative. Okay, so that means that 8 is going to be negative. Okay. And when I'm saying that, you should, by this point, you should know how your positive and negatives work. But if you need to, figure it out a little bit differently, that's fine. Okay, so I have x plus 1 and x minus 8, and we're going to check. We're going to use FOIL to check this. X times x is x squared. X times negative 8 is a negative 8x. 1 times x is 1x, and 1 times the negative 8 is minus 8. Then I combine my like terms, and I get a negative 7x. So we have x squared minus 7x minus 8, and that checks out. So, okay, go ahead and do practice 4. Okay, so 3 and 10, when you subtract those, you get 7. Since this is a negative, my larger number has to be negative. And so I will be using these two terms. So we have x plus 3 and x minus 10. Okay. All right, so that's our set of notes for page 1 when your leading coefficient is 1. Now we're going to go to page 2 where your leading coefficient is not 1, and it makes it a little bit more, just gives you a little bit more work, maybe a little bit more of a challenge. There is a method that is out there that I'm going to show you, and this is very beneficial for students who have a little bit trouble like with puzzles and stuff. I really like this lesson because it is like a puzzle and you kind of fit the pieces together at the end. So everything that we did on the first page, we're going to do on the second page, but then we have 2 additional steps at the end to figure out what the binomial is. And the reason is because the leading coefficient is no longer 1. And so that changes things a little bit. All right, so I will go and explain these when we get to steps 4 and 5. For right now, we're going to go ahead and go through steps 1 and 2 like we did on the first page. So make sure your trinomial is ordered from greatest degree to least degree. And like I said, I've already ordered them. Determine the factors of the product of the first and the second term. Oops. Oh, you know what? I'll change this before I send it to you, but this should say the first and last. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing that we did before. We're just going to multiply 5 times the first term, and we get 10. And then our middle term goes here. Okay, and so now we're going to determine which of those factors from step 2 will combine to get the second term. So let's figure out the factors of 10. We have 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. Okay. Well, this is addition here, so we know that those are going to be added together, and so they do equal 7, and they do multiply to get 10, so we are going to use these factors. Okay, so let me show you something. If we were to say, okay, this is our binomial, so let's go ahead and just put it into a binomial. Oops, x plus 2, x plus 5. Now, this is not the answer, and I'm going to show you how you can check. When I FOIL this back together, I get x squared plus 7x plus 10, okay? So I did x times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x, okay? So we have 5x, and then 2 times x is 2x. So I just combine those to get 7x, and then 2 times 5 is 10. That is not where we started. So you can't just take, whenever your leading coefficient is something other than 1, you can't just take these factors and do what we did on the first page. It will not work. When we multiply these two together, they need to equal 2x squared. When we multiply the last terms in each parentheses together, they need to equal 5. Well, that doesn't happen here, okay? So this is where the next step comes in. And you'll see that in our example here. We form this, after we do the x and we find the factors, we form this box here and we treat it as like a multiplication table, okay? So let's go ahead and do that, okay? I am going to create this box right down here. Okay. And I'm going to plug numbers into them. Now, what numbers do I use? Well, that's where this comes in. The first box here will contain, and I'll put it right here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, box 1, 2, 3, 4. The first box is going to contain the first term in your problem. Well, the first term is 2x squared. So I'm going to write that right here, 2x squared. Okay. The last box is going to contain, or box number 4 is going to contain the last term in your problem. So I'm going to put 5 right here. Okay. And then you have your 2 factors. Boxes 2 and 3 contain the 2 factors. So I'm going to put those there. So one thing that you need to know is that the first term and the last term have to go in these 2 boxes. If they don't go into those 2 boxes, you're going to end up with something wrong. But it does not matter which box the factors go in, whether it's the second or third box, okay? Now, once you've placed your numbers in the box, you are using the box as a multiplication table, okay? So if I need to find 2 factors of 2, well, the only 2 factors of 2, because it is a prime number, are 1 and 2. So I have 1 times 2. Now, because this is an x squared, I'm going to have an x and an x here. So 1x times 2x gives me 2x squared. Okay. Then I say, okay, well, 1 times what number is going to give me 5? And that's just going to be 5. 1 times 5. Okay. And in this case, we kind of ignore the x's there. And I typically don't even put the x's there. Probably in my next problems I won't. But then we say, okay, well, then what number here times this will give me a 2? Okay, well, 1. 1 times 2 is 2. This almost reminds me of a Punnett square in science. Okay. And then 1 times 5 is 5. So we have our box completed. The only 2 that will get the x's are the first 2 terms that we multiply right here. Okay. So when I write this out, I have 1x plus 1. And I'm just going to put x, not 1x, x plus 1. And then I have 2x plus 5. Okay. I know that some of you may be completely confused right now, and that's okay. That's why we have 8 practice problems on this page. So what you could do is you can come back and you can FOIL to check. X times 2x is 2x squared. X times 5 is 5x. 1 times 2x is 2x. And 1 times 5 is 5. And then I combine my like terms to get 7x. So we have 2x squared plus 7x plus 5, and that checks out. So we have our factored out answer. Okay, and that's how we do these. So let's do another one together. Okay, we're going to start off the same as we did on the other page. I'm going to create my x. 12 times 3 is 36, and my middle term is 13. So we're trying to come up with 2 terms that multiply to get a positive 36 and add to get a 13. Okay, so I know 1 times 36 isn't correct. 2 times 18? No. 3 times 12? No. 4 times 9? Yes. So 4 times 9 is my, and some of you can get that without listing all the factors. That's great. Okay, so now I'm going to create my box. And okay, I'm going to put my first term in the first box and my last term in the last box. And I'm not going to put my x's in there. Just know that the first term in each binomial is going to have an x. Then I use my factors, and it doesn't really matter where you place your factors. Okay. All right. So let's work this out. We have 1 times 3 is 3. And then we have 1 times 4 is 4. So 3 times what gives me 9? 3. 3 times 3 is 9. And then the last one will be a check. Does 3 times 4 equal the last box, 12? And the answer is yes. Okay. So we will end up writing x plus 3, because we have a 1. So just like imagine there's an x there and an x there. And then 3x plus 4. Okay. And if you would like to check these, you can using FOIL. And some of you could probably check it in your head. So 3x squared, that's right. And then the last two terms is 12, that's correct. And then you have 4x plus 9x, which gives you 13x. All right, let's look at example 6. So the first two that we just did were both addition. Now we have a little bit of subtraction going on, so we're going to see how that affects our outcome. Okay, so 3 times 6 is a positive 18, and then we have a negative 11. So based on the first page, you should be able to tell what your two numbers are going to be as far as what their signs are going to be, their operation in front of it. So if you recall, both of them should end up being a negative, okay? Because a negative times a negative gives you a positive, and a negative plus a negative gives you a negative. All right, so let's go with, 2 and 9, right? 2 times 9 is 18, 2 plus 9 is 11. And since this is negative, that means that both of these end up having to be negative. So negative 2 times a negative 9 does give us a positive 18, and negative 2 plus a negative 9 gives us a negative 11. Okay, so we now need to use our box. Okay. And we have our first term is 6, our last term is 3, and then our two terms in here are negative 2 and negative 9. Now remember, I could have swapped my negative 9 and 2. They don't have to go in that box. That's just typically how I write it. It's how I've always done it. Okay, so we've used these two right here. So now you get to the point where you have multiple factors and you're like, well, what do I put first? So I'm gonna use a pencil real quick to show you how sometimes you might have to change up your box a little bit. So I know that 3 times 2 is 6. So if I put 3 here and 2 here, okay, that works. But look at this, 3 times what gives me negative 2? Well, nothing. Okay, so that's not going to work here. So why don't I switch it? Okay, and I'm going to switch it doing this. What about 2 times 3? Well, 2 times 3 gives me 6 still. And 2 times a negative 1 gives me negative 2. That works. So then 3 times what gives me this negative 9? Negative 3. So negative 3 times 3 gives me negative 9. So then if you set this all up right, these last two terms will equal this last term in the box, and it does. Negative 3 times negative 1 equals 3. So sometimes you might have to manipulate your numbers a little bit to make them work, okay? And that's fine. That's just how this goes. So I have 2x minus 3, because that's a negative 3. And then I have 3x minus 1. Okay, so now I am going to use FOIL to double check. 2x times 3x is 6x squared. 2x times -1 is a -2x. -3 times a 3x is a -9x. And -3 times a -1 is a -3. And when I combine my like terms, I get a -11x. So 6x squared minus 11x minus 3. Oh, that should be a plus 3. Because -3 times -1. There we go. And that does check out. Okay. All right. You might start getting the hang of it about now. So if you want to try this next one on your own, you can. Let's go ahead and do this. We're going to deal with a little bit of larger numbers here. 15 times 4 is 60. And then we have a -23. That's an odd number. Literally, it's an odd number, but we don't usually use 23. Okay, so we have 1 and 60. We have 2 and 30. Oh, here we go, 3 and 20. That's got to be it. So let's set up our box. Okay. So our first term is 4, and our last term is 15. First term is 3 here, and our factor and factor. Okay. So I am going to go with, well, I was going to go with 2 and 2, but 2 times nothing equals 3. So I'm going to go with 1 and 4. 1 and 4. And then 1 times 3 equals 3. And then 5 times 4 equals 20, and 5 times 3 equals 15. So that works. Okay, so we have oh, wait a minute. I forgot to make these negative. That's a negative, that's a negative. That means that this is a negative and this is a negative. Okay, got to go back in and check because I was looking at this and I'm thinking, wait a minute, we need to have negatives in there. So 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times, that's going to have to be a -3. So 5 times 4 is a positive 20. So I'm going to make my 5 a negative, and then, so -5 times 4 equals a -20. And a -5 times a -3 gives me a positive 15. Now I have my right numbers. So x minus 5 and 4x minus 3. Good. Okay, next set of problems. Now the subtraction is between the second and the third term. So we have to be careful with our signs. -3 times 4 is a -12. And then we have a 4 in the middle. Okay, so our factors are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And it looks like it's going to be 2 and 6 because 6 minus 2 is 4. So because this is positive, our larger number has to remain positive. That means our smaller number is going to be negative. And -2 times 6 is a -12. -2 plus 6 is a 4, or 6 minus 2 is 4 if you switch it. Okay, we're going to draw our box out here. My boxes keep getting smaller and smaller. All right, 4 and -3, and then we have a -2 and a 6. Okay, so let's see, 2 times 2, and then 2 times a -1. And then 3 times 2 gives me 6, and 3 times a -1 gives me -3. All right, so our answer, 2x plus 3 and 2x minus 1. So let's use FOIL to check this. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times a -1 is -2x. 3 times 2x is 6x. And 3 times a -1 is a -3. And then when we combine our like terms, we get 4x. So we have 4x squared plus 4x minus 3. So that works out. Okay. Next one. Negative 8 times 6 is a negative 48. And then we have a positive 8. So let's see, we have 4 and 12. It works, 4 and 12. And our 4 is going to have to be negative, because 12 minus 4 gives you 8, or negative 4 plus 12 gives you 8. Negative 4 times 12 gives you negative 48. All right, 6 and negative 8, and then negative 4 and 12. So let's see if this will work. 2 times 3. 2 times a negative 2 gives me negative 4. 4 times 3 is 12, and 4 times a negative 2 is a negative 8. Yay! I love it when puzzles work like that. Some of you are probably rolling your eyes at me. It's okay. I understand. Math isn't for everyone. So 6x squared minus 4x plus 12x and then minus 8. Good. All right. Last set. Now we have both operations of negative in there. Okay, so same process. Negative 4 times 3 is a negative 12, and we have a negative 11. So I can already tell that it's going to be 1 times 12. So one of these has to be negative. Since our number here is negative, that means the largest one has to be negative. Okay. There we go. And here's my box down here. And we have a 3 and a negative 4, 1 and a negative 12. So let's see how this works. I think, so I'm going to do 1 times 3 here. And then I'm going to do a negative 4 here, because negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. And then 1 times 1 here. And negative 4 times 1 is a negative 4. So that works. So we have x minus 4 and 3x minus 1. So let's check that. X times 3x is 3x squared. X times a negative 1 is minus 1x. Negative 4 times 3x is negative 12x. Is that right? That's not going to work, is it? Oh, wait, this is positive. Sorry. So x times 3x, x times 1 is a positive 1. There we go. Negative 4. And then negative 4 times 1 is a negative 4. And then we combine our like terms and we get a negative 11x. See, sometimes using FOIL is beneficial because if you made a mistake, it will check it for you. So 3x squared minus 11x minus 4. All right. One last problem. Okay, negative 20 times 2 is a negative 40, and then we have a negative 3. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, 5 and 8. Look at that, 5 and 8. And 8 is going to have to be negative. So let me complete my box. Okay, so we have 2, negative 20, 5, negative 8. Okay. So 1 and 2, 1 and 5. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8, and negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. Easy breezy, lemon squeezy. All right, and there you have it. Let's see, 2x squared, 5x minus 8x is a negative 8. There you go. And that's how you do that. So I will, if you have any questions, let me know, and I will see y'all next time.